Today's presenters are Laura Schwartz with Regional Housing Legal Services and Chris Sandvig with Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group. Laura Schwartz is an attorney and Director of Economic Development at Regional Housing Legal Services. She works on a broad range of projects for clients involved in community stabilization and revitalization, including the development, financing of housing using low-income housing tax credits and commercial leasing of mixed-use developments located on commercial corridors. Chris Sandvig is the Director of Policy at Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group. He builds partnerships with corporate, nonprofit, institutional, grassroots, and government stakeholders to address broad issues with neighborhood-level implications. These include efforts to address blight, abandonment, and affordable housing access throughout southwestern PA's urban communities. It also includes transit advanced through PCRJ's Go-Burg program, whose community-based approach is driving policy changes to transform Pittsburgh's transit system into a vibrant, inclusive community revitalization engine. Chris holds a BS in Industrial Engineering from Penn State and the MS in Public Policy and Management from Carnegie Mellon, where he concentrated on urban and regional economic development and public finance. Laura, now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, and I hope everyone can hear me. My purpose today is not to I know you're going to be disappointed, not to make you all experts on the Neighborhood Assistance Program, but to flag some highlights of the program and some issues for you to consider when you are applying for an allocation of tax credits. And I'm also going to suggest some areas in which NAP, or the Neighborhood Assistance Program, can be improved, and things that we're working on here at Regional Housing Legal Services. I sent out, or what should have been sent out to you, is the guidelines for 2016. The guidelines for 2017 are not out yet. They will be out probably later this month, or maybe the beginning of July, at which point they'll open up the application period. But we don't expect that the guidelines will change all that much. So the 2016 guidelines were included with the materials you were sent. If you can open it, I will be referring to pages in the guidelines, and if you can't open it or you don't really want to look at it right now, just write down the page numbers, because it may be helpful to you later. Let's see if I can do this. So first, just to let you know about regional housing, we are created in 1973. We're a nonprofit law firm, and these are the various areas that we're involved in. I should also say that we have done a fair amount of consulting with DCED about the Neighborhood Assistance Program. We've collaborated on the guidelines, and we've sort of seen how the program is changing, and we're very much involved in talking to DCED about how it can be improved, including from what we hear from people throughout the state who are applying for it. So feel free to contact me if you have questions or comments about the program. So just to give you a very quick history of the Neighborhood Assistance Program, it's been serving vulnerable Pennsylvanians since 1967, So like Sergeant Pepper, it turns 50 this year. It was the first program of its kind created in the United States with a goal of benefiting impoverished areas. And for people in the Philly area, or actually anywhere in the state, it actually was modeled after the SmithKline Drug Company and the Tasty Baking Company, both of which were located in neighborhoods that became impoverished, and figured out that rather than spend all the money moving that it would take to move their operations, it would probably be more efficient and cheaper to actually invest some money in the community in which they were operating. So the program has been around since 1967, but by 2006, up to 50% of the $18 million in available tax credits were going unused. And that was because unlike there were better opportunities with other state tax credit programs, and the NAP program wasn't really staying competitive. There was a lot more benefit to contributors from the educational tax credit program and other programs. So as a result, about $18 to $24 million in potential investment in Pennsylvania communities was sitting on the table. So clearly the program needed improvements. So legislation was passed in 2006, and the brief summary of the improvements: they increased the credit rates, they expanded eligibility of the tax credits so that pass-through entities, S-corps, partnerships, and LLCs could actually use them. And just by way of background, in 1967 there was no such thing as a limited liability company. And a lot of companies are organized that way, but they couldn't use the tax credit. They also brought the credit limits up to $2,006, so that the credit limits, the amount that someone could receive in credits, went up to $500,000 for a single project or $1.25 million for 4 or more projects. And that's really important because a lot of the contributors are banks, and therefore they may have a statewide footprint. And this way they can contribute in different markets throughout the state. And also importantly, the new law permits the sale or transfer of unused credits. This is a great selling point when you're looking for a contributor, because you can tell them that they can mitigate some of the risk. You know, they may say, well, maybe we won't need a tax credit depending on how business is. But if they can't use it, they can actually sell it or transfer it to another company. So a great selling point. Well, of course, because the program was actually improved as a result of the 2008 recession, the program budget ended up getting slashed in 2009 and 2010. However, it was restored to $18 million, the tax credit allocation, in 2011. And as a result of the improvements, the program now receives twice as many applications as available tax credits. So it's a very, very competitive program, and if you're applying for an allocation, you're going to have to really have a competitive application. The typical timeline is that the application for the application period and the guidelines are announced in June or July, which is right around the time of the end of the fiscal year, and then beginning of the fiscal year. They put out the guidelines, and then when you apply, you propose how you're going to use the contribution from July 1st through September 30th. So it's actually a 15-month period during which you can utilize the money that is contributed to you. However, the contribution period, the period during which your contributor has to actually give you the money, is the fiscal year. So that is a 12-month year. So the beneficiary, the ultimate beneficiary of the program, and the people that you have to describe in your application, are low-income households that are located in a distressed or impoverished area, and that's a person or whose immediate family who meets these criteria, and it's 150% of the federal poverty level, or total income is 80% or less of AMI, or their income meets the criteria of another government program. As far as a distressed area, there's a number of ways to go about demonstrating that you'll be operating in a distressed area, and I've set it forth here: unemployment, underemployment, high percentage of people on public assistance, crime and delinquency, etc. There are also certain designations. For example, cities of the first, second, and third class, enterprise zones, keystone opportunity zones, and that's set forth on page 4 of the guidelines. So you may be able to just cut things short and say, look, we're a city of the second class. We're operating in this area, and therefore, by definition, we qualify as a distressed area. As far as the components of NAP, there are actually 5 tax credit funding streams available. I said 4. I left out the charitable food program, but I'm really only going to address the first 3 here. One has to do with the enterprise zone, which has to do with investment in private buildings and for-profit enterprises. And the charitable food program is, which is located on page 23 of the guidelines, is pretty self-evident. It's for food banks, pantries, and soup kitchens. So most people who are operating that are already aware of the program. So with respect to the 3 components we're going to address, the Neighborhood Assistance Program is discussed on page 12 of the guidelines, and in return for a contribution, a business organization receives a 55% tax credit against their state taxes for an approved project. The Neighborhood Partnership Program, which is something that many people are aware of, is the longer commitment. This is on page 19, and this is where a business, and it can be businesses, make a substantial long-term contribution, either 5 or 6 years, to an approved project in a distressed area. And the aim is to develop collaborations for high-impact long-term investment. You develop a plan together with your contributors, and it has to include a written agreement. And I always say to people that the one-year program, the NAP, is a great way to sort of test out a contributor. So if you have someone that you're looking at, this is an organization or a business that might be willing to invest in my community with my business for a long period, but they're a little hesitant, it's great to work with them for a year, get them to sign on for the NAP program, see how it works out, and then if it's successful, you can look towards a more long-term arrangement. So you can sort of date for a year. Just to let you know, in return for this longer commitment, 5 or 6 years, the tax credit benefit to the contributor is of course more, and it is 75% for a 5-year commitment and 80% if you get a 6-year commitment. And the third component is the special program priorities. This provides up to a 75% tax credit for contributors, and the way you fit into this is you have to fit into and address one of the designated priorities that DCED has set forth. And I've listed some of them here, but they're found on page 16 of the guidelines. And I'm glad to answer questions about that. So again, the application is set forth in the guidelines, and as I said, DCED currently receives applications for twice as much tax credit funding as is available. So you're going to have to be competitive. The first thing I've included is this map as far as being competitive, and as you can see, the DCED has 6 regions within the state. And the reason I put the map here is because it lists, you can find what region you're in, and it also lists who the regional directors are. The regional director, once you think you want to apply, is the first person you should call. The regional directors are really, no, I can't say she because there's one man. They are terrific, and they really want to see their region get tax credit allocations. I've worked quite a bit with the regional director in our area, and often when people contact me, when clients contact me and say they're interested in applying for an allocation, I urge them to set up a meeting with our regional director. You may have a couple of ideas that you want to pitch. You can go in, you can discuss your various ideas, and your regional director will know which idea is the most competitive. So I really urge you the first thing you should do is contact your regional director once you have an idea and something you want to pursue. One of the components of the application is that you provide a narrative of your project. And sometimes this is called the 4 Ps, just like there are the 5 Ws when you write a news story. The 4 Ps are, and this is all geared towards how you are going to tell a story about what your application wants to do and what you will do with your contribution. The first P is place. You're going to describe the target area with physical boundaries and relevant demographics. Now, the target area, it used to be the DCED said, the target has to be a specific neighborhood. And you had to describe where the neighborhood began, where the neighborhood ended. And this made it very, very difficult for non-urban and especially rural areas to get funding because the target areas was much larger than the neighborhood that DCED had in mind. So now you pick your target area and you describe what the physical boundaries are. If you are going to be serving the homeless on a countywide basis, it may be that your target area is that entire county. So if you can make the argument that you have the right demographics and you meet the other criteria, that's fine. The next P is problem, and you need to describe the need that you're going to be meeting and provide statistics, whether it's of unemployment, the percentage of residents receiving public assistance, the adequacy of housing, the dropout rate, the amount of vacant buildings, whatever the problem you're addressing is. Next, you have to describe your project. So you've outlined the problem and where it is, and you just describe how you're going to address it. And then finally, you need to describe your proposed outcomes. And DCED really likes to see how you are going to present your results and how you're going to measure the impact of your project. This, and I just want to include these pages. This is the tax benefits for business firms, and it's broken down for each type of business firm that could be contributing to your project. It's around page 37. They don't number the pages sequentially in the guidelines. So it's Exhibit B, and it's sort of in the middle of the guidelines. And this is a great tool for you, again, when you're trying to get a contributor, because it lays out, and we won't go through the math, but it lays out the impact, say, of a $200,000 contribution, both when you combine the impact of a federal tax credit deduction, because people often forget that they're going to get a deduction against their federal taxes, and then they're going to get a state tax credit against their state taxes. So just to give you an idea, and I think this can be very, very persuasive. If you look down, the impact, depending on which program it is, can mean that the contributor's actual cost per $100 might be as little as $7 per 100, or $59 per 100. So it's really a substantial benefit to them, and it goes beyond just the tax credit. Some of the issues that we've been involved with and that I want to bring to your attention is in terms of where NAP can be improved, and Chris is really going to be talking about this in greater detail. The tax credit is underutilized outside the biggest cities in the state. And as I mentioned before, the neighborhood-based format has created a lot of challenges for suburban and rural applicants, with the exception of charitable food banks. starting in 2015, DCED introduced the concept of a target area, and that's why I flagged it for you, because you now get to define your target area. So please be aware of that. Also, they created a new priority, and we were somewhat involved in this. And the new priority, which you'll see if you go to page 17 of the guidelines, is that you get the higher tax credit rate, up to 75%, for affordable housing and supportive services for at-risk populations. And the at-risk, that means if you're repairing, rehabilitating, constructing, or preserving housing, or provided supportive services to low-income households, including, and this is not necessarily limiting, the homeless, the disabled, those suffering from chronic illness, the elderly, or the frail. And this is really in keeping with this Governor Wolf's initiative to have as few people unnecessarily institutionalized as possible. Hopefully some of you will have questions, because I really don't want to take up any of Chris's time, but I have provided links to the 2016 guidelines, the regional offices with the interactive map, and information on regional housing legal services. So with that, I'm going to, this has been very hurried, but I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Okay. First off, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good, Chris. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, Laura, thank you so much for that. And also, Victoria, thank you for having me on this webinar. My name is Chris Sandvig. I am the Director of Policy for the Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group. And what I'm going to focus on primarily today is advocacy that is existing to expand the tax credit allocation that is available for the Neighborhood Assistance Program, family of programs that Laura did such a great job of describing. So first, a little bit about PCRG. We've been around since 1988 formally. We existed before that. And we grew out of a clear need here in the Pittsburgh area for a watchdog for bank lending practices initially, and expanded into public policy issues and access to capital for neighborhood revitalization, affordable housing development and access, and public transportation as we were going through that. We have a membership base of close to 60 community development corporations, economic development corporations, neighborhood groups, place-focused charities within southwestern Pennsylvania. And what we do is we work on issues that cross neighborhood bounds but have very acute local impacts on the works that our members do in the community and economic development sphere. The intersection of land, mobility, and capital is kind of how we talk about that. So I won't go too much into the Neighborhood Assistance Program. I'm going to rifle right through these because, as I said, Laura did such a really great job prior to this on this. To go forward here to some of the things that we run into, I think, as we try and do our advocacy for this work. So the program does have a proven track record of building a sustainable tax base and revenues within the places they serve, and also for the Commonwealth itself. The big piece from the perspective of those that we represent, and full disclosure, our own NAP programs, is the ability to build capacity within the community and economic development system for on-the-ground actors. That includes a number of things like supporting the development within blighted and abandoned communities and navigating the issues associated with that. Here in Western Pennsylvania, actually, we had a number of cases where the program has been used for those partnerships, and some of the outlying municipalities have actually helped in terms of government reform as well at the local level. It benefits businesses, housing, workforce development, and blight. We talked about that a little bit before. Some examples from our region, I think that's really strong, is how while two of these are within the city of Pittsburgh itself, two are actually very small municipalities right outside the city that don't have their own capacity in the way that a major city does in these things. Wilkinsburg listed there at the bottom. One of the examples on the capacity and sort of partnership side of things that's come out of that is a study of the Wilkinsburg School District and what sort of impact it was having on the viability of the community to redevelop, and a partnership with this Pittsburgh Public Schools, which were right next door, for the merger of their high school with the Pittsburgh Public Schools, which ultimately will lead to a property tax reduction in an area that has the highest property taxes within the state. The multi-year nature of this program creates the opportunity to build those long-term partnerships on the ground. And the thing I think that's really important to remember with it from our perspective is that these are projects that people are developing partnerships with tax credit investors and then going to the state to sell that project in the market of ideas and the application process that Laura highlighted. So this is not just, okay, here's some tax credits and thank you very much, community group, for what it is you're going to do. There's been other things that have come through communities through this, ranging in sources from financial literacy training to helping broker relationships with developers and deals for projects, and other technical and political resources they may not have otherwise had. This map is on a website which I will share with you later, and it really maps out where the 2016 allocations went. As was mentioned, the southeastern and southwestern Pennsylvania corners certainly have their share of these, but it's really been working across the state. And I think that one of the real challenges that has been, as we've been trying to work on expanding the program, is helping legislators understand what's going on in their own backyard in a lot of cases, particularly when you get into the center and the northern parts of the state. Unless you're maybe within the Scranton or Erie areas, people aren't necessarily aware of what's going on there. There's some myths that are about this. And some things that are holding us back. I may have the year wrong on this slide. The one thing that's very interesting is, had this program been indexed to inflation, we would have well over $100 million in this. There are myths about who it's for, what it can do, and that it even exists. Pittsburgh has been very successful in recent years, and one of the things we've run into when talking with legislators is that the program is just a Pittsburgh program. And ironically, when we got Pittsburgh investors and community groups involved, people thought it was just a Philadelphia program. It's a statewide program. It can be used in a number of areas and in a number of ways. It is oversubscribed, and Laura talked a little bit about what precipitated that in terms of the DCED budget. But the other thing that's also been happening is, frankly, the way that you can access the funds and use the funds, that community actors find this actually a more preferable way of doing business than some of the programs that did exist under DCED. One of the things, for example, that people like is the multi-year availability of some of the program areas. So what's going on right now is we're trying to double that tax credit allocation to $36 million. We have started a formal coalition. It started in the west, and it's been growing north and eastward with every day. There are actually over 52 organizations now that are part of this. It's public and private entities that have been supporting it. The nonprofit world, the for-profit world has been heavily involved. We've had a number of actions. In fact, we've had a couple Hill Days meeting with legislators. Here at our annual summit last week, we actually had a call blast during our lunch session where several hundred people called the state legislature and asked them to pass legislation to double the program. There are two bills that are working their way through the legislature right now, one in the House and in the Senate. They're both bipartisan. The Senate bill is actually almost a 50-50 split. And the House bill has made it to the floor. So what our push right now is for both of these bills to be on the floor, both of these bills to be part of the discussion within the budget, and to double the tax credit allocation, because this is a program that really does work for a number of communities, including the Commonwealth itself. Right now, you can sign up at napcoalition.com. Certainly contact your legislators and senators. We have resources on our website at PCRJ.org that you can download, as does the NAP Coalition website, to do that. And stay tuned for other pieces of that. And I rifled through these slides super fast so we could get to questions. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand it back over to Victoria.
Thanks, Chris and Laura. Really appreciate you presenting today. Now we're going to just open up the lines to the folks on this call to see if anyone has any questions.
The conference has been unmuted. The conference has been muted.
So we're getting a great deal of feedback, so I'm actually going to just mute the lines. It's *7 to unmute yourself if you have a question, and you can also type in questions in the chat box. I see that Annette has your hand raised. Do you have a question, Annette? This is a question from Maria just about the packet that the presenter referred to during her presentation, so what Laura was talking about during her part. I can send that out to the group along with the PowerPoint slides and recording of today's session. Do we have any questions? Could we hear a case study about how affordable housing was created with this program?
Yeah, sure. And this is actually has to do. Well, first of all, I am going to send people out a list, or I'll send it to Victoria, a list of the successful applications from the past year. Things that were approved. I can give you an example, and I know this example well because we, Regional Housing, were actually the applicant. We represented a group called New Kensington Community Development Corporation, and they took a factory, a former mill that was it was abandoned, it was blight, it was like the #1 place to go shoot up in Kensington. If you've read about Kensington, it's pretty much the center of the heroin epidemic in Philadelphia. The building was, I think, within 3 blocks of the worst drug corners in the city, and it was really an attractive nuisance. And it looked like something when you see a picture of Berlin after the German surrender. It looked bombed out. And they took it, they acquired it from the city, and they've developed it into housing. And we were able to represent them through the entire pre-development process, and we don't charge for that. But obviously we had a lot of cost to cover, and we were able to get a donation that would cover a portion of our legal costs. So that definitely contributed to it. Another way that it can be used is it's never going to be enough to actually finance a building completely, but if you've ever developed affordable housing, there's always gaps. So you may get a lot of funding from the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. You may be able to support some financing. You may get some soft financing, but inevitably there's a gap. It could be a couple $100,000 or more. And if you're a nonprofit with enough money, you can probably put some of your own money into it. But if you're a smaller nonprofit, you probably can't. So this could be a great way to meet a funding gap. And again, I'm going to send you the list of approved projects for this year, and that should help as well. Oh, another thing I should mention. is that contributions can be money or they can be in-kind donations. So for example, there's a group in the Pittsburgh area called Rebuilding Together that does neighborhood revitalization, and they were able to sign on Lowe's. And as I said, most of the contributors are banks, but this was a perfect fit to get, here we do home renovation for low-income homeowners, and we got both a monetary and in-kind donation from Lowe's. And so you can get in-kind donations, and if you're doing affordable housing, you can take in-kind donations for furnishings. So again, it's never going to fund all the cost of the housing, but it's a great way to fill in some of the gaps.
Great, thanks, Laura. I have a question from Joanne. Is there a way to find out which businesses in our area have contributed to this tax credit program?
Yes, absolutely, because I am going to send you, broken down by region, the successful applications. I will give it to Victoria, and she'll circulate it. And for example, you can see that in Lehigh Valley, there's a list of the banks: National Penn Bank, M&T Bank, some smaller banks. So you'll see who contributes.
Great. We have a question from Arnold. To what extent can the project benefit the contributor?
Chris, do you want me to take that, or?
Yeah, that actually is an excellent question. Frankly, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, the benefit, I'll tell you, the benefit is pretty much the state tax credit. It's taxes, and it's a direct credit. So it's taxes that they don't have to pay. As far as banks, one of the reasons banks contribute as well is if you're familiar with the Community Reinvestment Act, they get credit, quote unquote, under the Community Reinvestment Act for contributions they make. So that's one reason that a lot of banks contribute. So that then, because of all the mergers, when they go in and they want to acquire other banks, and they're reviewed, this sort of is like a good mark in their favor. So that's, to the extent, what's the benefit? Well, another, there is sort of the intangible benefit as the bank is seen, or the contributor is seen as someone who gives back to the community. Also, I would say there's the benefit of, if you're doing business in a community and the community is plagued by certain problems, it is probably going to affect your ability to do business. So some of those can be fairly intangible, but that's all of a benefit. I don't know what else what you had in mind.
Right. So I think if I can maybe jump in here, Laura was right to pick on the CRA side of things, which is also one of the reasons why banks are very interested in it. One of the things I will say is also that service type companies are more interested in it than, say, a number of manufacturing concerns, and part of that is because they have other ways to get their tax deferments, if you will. So there is that. The benefit, I think, also when it comes to financial institutions is it gets them a little closer to the ground about what's going on in some of these communities from a real estate perspective and a development.
That's a great point.
Right. So while they may not necessarily, in addition, beyond the tax credit and then the federal tax deduction, and the CRA piece, is their ability now to understand how the market is shifting. And that is in a number of ways. It can also be in the small business loan side of things. So, for example, Lawrenceville, which may not be eligible for an NAP their next cycle because of just how successful that community's been and sometimes been a victim of their success, it has the largest concentration of women-owned businesses in western Pennsylvania. And part of that is because of the partnerships that were created to help bring that capital to finance and underwrite the starting of those businesses. that partnership would not have existed had those NAPs not been on the ground in the first place. So there's a benefit there, I would say, in addition to just the tax credit side of things. Also, one of the things I would say is if they're, just to add in, as Laura mentioned, the banks, if there is anybody who is on the call who applied for an NAP and did not get one, I certainly think joining the coalition is I think would be a great thing, because one of the things that we are challenged with is knowing who is out there who did apply but was not awarded. So those voices being part of this is important as well.
And I also want to add that we have last year we had a client come to us and they said, well, I've been talking to someone at a bank. They're not that familiar with the program. So they were able to send them information, but they didn't know anyone that had used the program. So having this list of banks that have been successful, you can say to a bank, if they say, well, I've never done this, you can say, well, that's interesting, because in this area, do you know anyone at, and you can give them a list of banks that have done it, and they can call someone there and find out, how does it work? Were you satisfied with it? So they talk to each other.
Great. We have a question from Linda. Are the credits allocated geographically by DCED region?
Chris, do you want to do that, or you want me to do it?
I think that honestly this year they actually did make a more intentional effort at being more geographically diverse.
I would agree. And I also think that changing the concept of a target area made them able to be more geographically diverse.
Yeah. The rules making for a lot of how the credits are allocated and the reporting is actually within the purview of DCED, not within the legislation itself. So they can change things from a year-to-year basis. Now, that being said, there's only so much of that $18 million that actually is available for new NAP family of programs because of the multi-year nature of the program itself. But there was, and they made a big point, I think, this year of releasing the list of projects, which are on the interactive map that is at napcoalition.com, and you can see them there.
Great, thanks. We have a question from Musa. We are a new CDC located within Southwest Philadelphia. How do we qualify to participate in the program since we are new?
If you are, if you have a 501c3 and you are a federally tax exempt under the C3 program, you are eligible.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions before we close for the day? I see a question from Robert. Robert, it's *7 to unmute. Again, that's *7, Robert. Or we can also follow up with you after the presentation as well. Any other questions? Oh, we have one from Ryan. Do we have any idea what the hot project types will be this year for the award?
I don't know. I don't know that answer. I don't know. Do you have a sense, Chris?
Honestly, I don't. I think that, I couldn't even take a stab at that.
I think they're always looking for good projects and competitive applications. I thought one of the applications that came in from our area, so I saw it before I went in, that I thought was really interesting, and it had to do with vulnerable populations, so I was particularly interested. It had to do with an organization that had identified a group of people that was very difficult to provide services to because they were medically ill, chronically homeless people. So the problem was that typically they would receive home health care services, but guess what? They didn't have a home. So it was sort of like, well, and they can't really be in a home until they're medically stable. So it was a real catch-22, and they were going to, they got a contribution, and they were going to allocate the money specifically to someone that would arrange temporary places for the people to stay, whether it was a motel or whatever, and bring in healthcare services so that they could be medically stabilized and then able to move into a home. So, it was something that sort of came from being on the ground and doing the work already, but it was innovative. So, and I think that's what made it a good application. So it probably wasn't a need that DCED was even aware of before it was brought up. But, I think you know what you're doing in your area. You know what needs to be done. And in that 4P portion of the application, you're going to sell your project, and you're going to say, here's the population I'm working with. Here's the area. Here's the big problem plaguing this area, and this is how I'm going to address it. This is how I'm going to address it with the contribution. So I think if you have a good project and you can sell it, I don't think sort of the topic is as important. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the outcomes that you're driving, they're paying more close attention to that, and the flexibility of the program allows you, I think, to generate some really great outcomes. So.
Great.
And it should be a result that you can quantify in some way. That's the proposed outcome portion of it. How are you going to show us whether it succeeded? They love seeing that.
Any additional questions before we close for the day? Again, star 7 or chat in the chat box.
Hi, this is Bob Beggs. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
Yay. I was hoping my microphone on my computer was live, but it obviously wasn't.
Oh, yes.
Hey, thank you for the presentations today. It was very helpful. We're new to this NAP program, our organization is, and what I didn't see, I'm not completely understanding, is the timeline for a project being approved. So it sounded to me like I identify a compelling project, we get some businesses behind this that are looking for this credit. We submit a proposal, and the proposals are June, July timeframe, I think, if I got your first slide right.
Yeah, that's about right.
So once we submit, now these guys are all waiting, everybody's at that point waiting to hear whether we get selected or not. When do we get notified? When does the project actually start? When does it have to complete? I know you said there's 5 year, there's 6 year commitments, whatever.
Right. It's that's a problem because that's really within the control of DCED. You're going to have to get the contribution, as I said, within the fiscal year, but you're going to have that extra 3-month period to actually get it done, and that has to do, so that's hopefully the lag time that it takes them to approve it. But again, it's sort of within the control of DCED. Would you say that's accurate, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the one thing I think that maybe changes a little bit from year to year is the SPP program, especially, because that is a special projects program. That's what that is.
Right.
So those can vary, I think, a little bit more than NPP or NAP, and that also is not, I believe, a multi-year opportunity.
No, that's a 1-year opportunity. I mean, we may have a better sense. When they actually put out the guidelines, and certainly if I hear anything about when they're, what that timing is, I'll let Victoria know, and she can circulate it to the group.
So it sounds like it's really important to work with your regional DCED person.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, I got to tell you,
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. and they have their ear to the ground more than anyone. And I have gone in with clients where, and I just wanted to listen and see how it worked, where the client would have three, say, I have 3 ideas, and these are my 3 ideas, and the regional director listened, and after the first one went, and then second one went, and then the third one went, yes, I like that. That's the one they did, because they will push for your application.
Okay, well that's good. So you should meet with them first before
Yep.
you do anything, and then given they're nodding north-south, then we then go meet with the companies
Yep.
to get behind it. And
yeah, and I think that they will tell you. You may say, well, this is my idea, and they may say, well, here's the issue, and then you can sort of fine-tune your project around that.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks. We're newbies, so that was very helpful.
Great.
Any other additional questions before we end the webinar today? Okay, thanks everybody for getting on. We will send out the PowerPoint and a lot of Laura's attachments, as well as the recording next week. So thanks again for getting on, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.